Well done, Josie. I'll start and wait for the first slide to come up.
Oh, no, that's 1 second, sorry.
No, that's good. I'll carry on verbally. You will all have heard what I'm about to say. One of the things about our program is that it's standard and repeatable. So I'm going to say the same thing that I've said for previous years. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending our Southwest Regional Coastal Monitoring Programme Partners Day, for short PCO Partners Day 2020. My name is John Cocker. I chair the programme, and this is our 17th year, including the first 2 years setup. So the programme, as you know, is managed and led by Ruth Adams at Teignbridge and by the brilliant PCO team. They're based at the University of Plymouth, and in partnership with the other regional coastal monitoring programmes, we monitor the whole of the English coastline and the Welsh coastline. So the Southwest Monitoring Programme is carried out on behalf of the Southwest Coastal Group, and that group represents the risk management authorities for our region. I am in awe and admiration of the PCO team and their contractors, despite COVID and many other challenges. As usual, we're on time, quality, the amount of data, the standard of it, the cost, everything on program. So well done, team. If I could have the second slide, please, Josie. So we're in our second year of the National 5-year phase, which is our third phase locally, and we're heading towards the next phase, which is a 6-year phase in line with the Environment Agency's 6-year programme. Our funding partners and main strategic partners are the Environment Agency, Teignbridge District Council being the lead authority, Plymouth University, DEFRA, and our regional risk management authorities. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of those organisations for their continued support. So the next phase of our monitoring work is going to cost us about £10 million, and it will follow the requirements of our shoreline management planning, which is undergoing a much needed refresh at the moment. The monitoring programme and the shoreline management programme will fit in with the Environment Agency's strategy for the next 6 years. And the important parts of that strategy are that we will work together to achieve those climate resilient places, the resilience of our infrastructure and the growth needed in UK PLC, and of course a nation locally, regionally, nationally ready to respond to whatever comes our way. And I'm going to say this again later, but I'll say it now. With your help, we will protect our communities. Next slide, please, Josie. The last one. So, as with last year's Partners Day introduction, I showed an image of Greta Thunberg and my grandchildren. For me, Greta represents the expectations of our communities and in particular our youngsters. They want us to be truthful, honest and unbiased, and to involve them in our knowledge, our predictions and our options for going forward to help them manage their future. So my yardstick for the future is how my grandchildren and their friends will reflect on the efforts that we put in to have a decent, sustainable world that they can continue to be safe in for the future. So I want to thank once again the PCO team, their contractors, the wider colleagues from the regional monitoring programs, academia. Without you chaps using our information, we would not be in this excellent place at the moment. And I particularly want to thank the presenters today and everyone attending. You're helping to understand and to mitigate the risks and helping us towards a sustainable future for our coastline community. So well done. So I'll finish there, hand over to Joseph, and I look forward to a good set of questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. I'm hoping you can see my screen and all hear me all right. Yeah, thank you all for attending. I appreciate this is very different to what we normally do, and as Josie said, we haven't got a buffet this year, but I hope it's been beneficial, and I hope you've all managed to have a look at our annual meeting page to check out some of the really good material that have been posted by our speakers for this year. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the programme that's happened over the last year and just touch on where we're hoping to go in the future with the next phase in March 2021. So just to cover the PCO team, we've had a little bit of a change up recently. So congratulations first to John, who's been re-elected as chair of the South West Coast Group and is also chair of the programme. Then we have Richard Rainbow and Ruth Adams in Team Bridge District Council end, Ruth being the programme manager. And instead of the lovely Emerald, you'll now have to put up with me for a year, as Emerald has gone on maternity leave and is actually, I think, expected to be giving birth sometime soon. Haven't heard anything yet though. And aside from the usual suspects of Josh, Josie and Izzy, we've got a new team member who is Thomas Darley. He is our GIS lead and has been doing an excellent job of streamlining workflows and has done wonders for the asset programme, which I'll mention in a minute. We're also hoping to employ a new coastal process scientist to bring our numbers back up to speed over the next couple of weeks. And over lockdown, everybody's been working from home. But as you can see, I'm now back in the office. Not that anybody else wants to join me, apparently, on my own. So just a quick cover of what data types were impacted by the last year. So understandably, it's been a really difficult year for all, but fortunately, as a programme, we've gotten away relatively unscathed from a data delivery perspective. So for topography, we missed out on 6 spring interim surveys. All of these were either in South Devon or Dorset. However, these were either covered by post-storms or they all received a repeat baseline survey in the summer months regardless. Even more unfortunately, we missed out on our annual autumn trip to the Isles of Scillies and hence missed out on capturing any topographic data there. But thankfully, as a result, we've commissioned a LiDAR flight through the geomatics team of the Scillies, and that was flown in early September, so at the same time that we were hoping to be out there, so that will cover any gaps and more, hopefully. In terms of the hydrodynamic network, there were 7 scheduled inspections which were postponed, but the national contractors, Fugro, have been chasing these down, and that's been relatively unaffected by that. And finally, there was no scheduled LiDAR flight to happen last year. However, there was an outstanding polygon from the full flight year before in the form of Burnham-on-Sea that was unfortunately missed due to bad weather and COVID implications. And aside from that, full aerial imagery and habitat mapping dataset was captured throughout 2019 for the phase, so that was therefore not affected. The same with bathymetry. So overall, we've done pretty well regarding the circumstances. So just a bit on hydrodynamics. We've currently got 13 directional wave riders, 2 step gauges and 2 wave radar X's that are operating. So we had several lost connections with the drift wave buoys over the winter, but overall, with the exception of Bideford Bay wave buoy, which was offline between February and March this year, we had a recovery rate of data of 97% throughout the winter period. So a really good effort, and big thanks to Thomas Dupe and the Fugro team at CCO. Despite there only being 5 named storms by the Met Office between October and May, the storm threshold for the 13 wave buoys was exceeded a total of 76 times, with St Mary's Sound, Porthleven and Chesil all recording 8 instances respectively. And currently the programme's hoping to install an additional 6 meteorological stations. These will be at Exmouth, Port Isaac, Minehead, Weston-super-Mare and the second Severn Bridge crossing, as well as Penzance. The Penzance Met Station is working alongside Cornwall Council to support the ongoing Mount-based strategy there. So hopefully that will be installed soon. The idea is to bolster up our wave and tidal network with the associated meteorological data with a hope of increasing sort of incident management and future predictions as they come along. These will be recording as a basis wind speed, wind direction, gusts, rainfall, and temperature. So please keep an eye out for these. Onto the topographic. So we've had, since last September, 101 autumn interims and 110 spring interim surveys done, not including the Isles of Scilly. So this is equated to over 1,500 profiles collected in the last year as scheduled. And as well as that, we've had all of our 16 repeat baselines completed, with this one on the right here is just the most recent data from Dawlish Warren. So that's adding an additional 670 profiles. We had 15 post-storm surveys between 2019 and 2020 winter storm season. This might seem like a lot, but in relation to other years, it's pretty low. It's well below average. You can see from the plot here, the big hitters in 2013-14 and 2017-2018, Beast and East and Emma. And in addition to that, we've also got our annual reports underway. So 4 out of the 8 are now currently available upon request, with the other 4 hopefully being completed in the next couple of weeks. Now I'd just like to briefly touch on LiDAR, aerial imagery and habitat mapping. As I mentioned, none of these were set deliverables for the last year, but the 2020-21 LiDAR flying season has started as of September 2020. This year is a repeat flying year, so only capturing priority areas. And already the geomatics team have done incredibly well in capturing over 90% of the outstanding polygons. So you can see here the yellow polygons have been captured already with the addition of the Isles of Scilly, and the red polygons are still outstanding, which will hopefully be captured between now and next March. The aerial imagery flight of the southwest coastline for this phase was officially complete in July 2019. We've now got 4 complete sets of the southwest ready for download on the national website. And it's really useful to have that decade-long difference between aerial flights, sometimes simply to state the obvious. So here's a couple of examples. We've got Crantock Beach in North Cornwall on the left, showing the difference between 2008 and 2018. And you can see the general loss of the dune system and the sort of retreat of the mean high water spring mark. And then sort of opposite to that, you've got Parr Beach on the right here, also in Cornwall, in South Cornwall, which shows the relative progradation of the dune system between 2007 and 2018. Resultingly from the 4 aerial sets, we now have 4 complete sets of habitat mapping available. The most recent data set is available from download from the national website, and you can get the other sets directly from request from PCO. The programme didn't have any scheduled bathymetry to be completed. However, we did have a collaboration with Teambridge District Council to get a full swath survey done between the ex-estuary and Teignmouth. This is it shown here, just stitched together with the most recent LiDAR. So that's Dawlish Warren, you can see, and the ex-mouth, and it runs all the way down to Teignmouth. We also had Brixham Harbour surveyed on behalf of Torbay District Council. The survey was done to IHO Order 1A and was processed and quality assured by the MCA and UKHO. Bathymetry, as you can all imagine, can be extremely costly. So following the full capture of what we like to call the white ribbon around the southwest coast, it's now becoming more efficient to undertake smaller sort of targeted surveys in collaboration with other RMAs. So we'll likely be seeing more of this sort of survey in the future on behalf of the programme. Onto the Coastal Asset Programme. The team have been working really hard to get it to where it is today, doing some sort of under the bonnet modifications of the asset database. This is including a full restructuring of the data set and ensuring it's fit for purpose. Also meeting RMA obligations, also trying to be compatible with the Environment Agency AIMS data set to sort of future-proof the programme. We're currently engaging with RMAs to understand how this data is stored, especially with relation to T98 inspections, and how we can help fill in the gaps, particularly with regards to private assets. So those are, please continue to work with us, and we really appreciate your help. Through the efforts of Tom and Ruth, with some really valuable input from Alex Purcell, we've developed an asset collector app, which you can see snippets of on the right here. This is aimed to be used by an asset inspector in the future to be collecting any data around the southwest. And the sort of big future plans for this financial year are to ensure that we have the appropriate engagement from the Environment Agency with regard to the aims dataset to make sure they talk to each other, develop routines that we can import or export RMA data in or out of the asset register really easily, extend the register to cover Wessex, extract any missing crest level heights through LiDAR or topographic ground surveys, test and trial the collector app, and finally develop an inspection regime that is affordable for the program going forward. So some really big movements in the asset program. Some additional projects that I'd just like to touch on. The CoastApp Southwest project has been a great success so far. We've now installed 9 sites around Dorset, Devon and Cornwall, with a bit of budget to install a few more at priority locations. The structure is really simple. It's a metal cradle, fixed point photography cradle with a sign for instructions that you can see numerous different types of in the photos. This is funded by the Environment Agency with an aim to both encourage members of the public to become ingrained with their ongoing monitoring occurring at their local or visiting beach, but also it's aimed to try and capture valuable image data from high priority sites. So far, we've received over 2,600 images submitted by members of the public since January 2020, and the most popular site by far is Porthmeor in St Ives, which received over 400 images in just under 2 months over the summer. Next, we have cliffline mapping. So to accompany our more recent aerial data sets, we recently procured a contractor to identify cliffline locations around the southwest. So this is using the aerials and LiDAR for ground truthing. And included in this work package are what we call change polygons. So comparing the 2012 to the 2018 aerial data sets. So you can see here on the right, these would be erosion polygons between the 2 data sets. This will be available for download on the national website as soon as we are finished with quality checking it, hopefully in the next upcoming months. On behalf of the Environment Agency and West Somerset and Taunton Council, we've commissioned a combined UAV and terrestrial laser scan survey of the unstable cliffs at Blue Anchor and Watchet. This is to include a baseline survey which was complete over the last couple of weeks, and a follow-up survey which will be completed in approximately 6 months' time to try and capture any significant change on the unstable cliffs there and to aid the upcoming scheme. Now, we appreciate that the power of UAV surveys, and this would likely play a really big role in data collection for the programme in the future. So this was an excellent exercise for us to become involved in preparation for the next phase. And finally, we've been closely monitoring the developments in Earth observation from space. And as a programme, we've undertaken a trial with the satellite application Catapult, whose aim it is to help UK organisations to harness the power of satellite-based services. So through this initiative, we've been trying to better understand how we can utilise an array of satellite instruments to either enhance or progress our coastal monitoring. Discussions on this are still ongoing. And finally, just a sort of look into the future. Next April, we'll start our 4th phase of monitoring. The funding has been approved in principle, but we won't receive our actual allocations until later this year or early next year. This will inform our funding for the next 6 years. So in preparation for this, we've undertaken a survey review with our RMA partners of all the data collected across the Southwest programme, which neatly fell alongside the SMP refresh that has been underway. So this has allowed us to tailor any additional data needs or gaps going forward. As of next year, we will have collected 15 years worth of data, so providing a substantial array of monitoring data for the Southwest coastline. We can now very comfortably say that we have the data collection and processing procedures pretty well honed, and this will allow us to allocate more time to making the data more sort of digestible, while combining multiple data types to support RMAs with any analysis that they might require. With that said, next year will be our 15th anniversary as a programme for collecting data, so please expect something a lot bigger. In particular, there will definitely be a larger buffet if we're allowed, which unfortunately can't offer you this year. But for the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. Right, so that's a roundup of what we've been up to. And I'd like to introduce now to Killian Voss, who is one of our presenters this year. I hope you've all had a chance to watch his really interesting presentation. I'll hand you over now to Killian. I think he's going to share his screen, possibly. So away you go, Killian.
Yep.
Hey, hello, everybody. Thanks, Josie, for inviting me to this meeting. So the presentation I recorded is on COSAT. So it's an open source toolbox to extract shorelines from publicly available satellite imagery. So I'll just, in the presentation, I describe some of the application, but I just want to run through a quick demonstration at a UK site. So just maybe 4 minutes. So I selected Slapton Sands, where Jak McCarroll has done quite a lot of work with COSAT. So you can just select a polygon, like this is 10 square kilometers. And then I'll just go through. So then once you have a polygon, you can download through Google Earth Engine the publicly available satellite imagery for that region of interest. So as a demonstration here, I've put some dates, so from March to July 2020, and I'm only selecting Landsat 8. So then you can download all the imagery for that region of interest, and then there's a shoreline extraction algorithm. And there's 3 different modes to map the shorelines. The first one is fully automated, so you won't see what's happening and you'll just get the shorelines, but I don't recommend this one when you're using it for the first time, because you want to see what the algorithm is actually doing. And then there's two more interactive modes where you can actually look at the detected shorelines. So I'll just go through a few images to show you what the algorithm is doing. So that's my region of interest. So you have an RGB image, a classified image with the sand, white water, and water pixels. And then a water index image. And then on the bottom, you have the distribution of the pixel intensities in the water index for each one of the classes. So in this interactive mode, you can zoom in and look at the shoreline that was mapped automatically. And then you can accept or reject each detection. So for example, this one, okay, it's good enough, so we can keep it. And then it will automatically load the next image. And you can go through the entire archive pretty quickly. So I think there'll be around 500 images at Slapton Sands from all the different satellites. And sometimes, so that's the latest update. Sometimes there can be some biases in the detection, because so we're trying to develop it so it works everywhere, but there's always some issues at some sites. So if you see that there's some biases, I've made a new option where you can actually adjust the detection. So here we can see it's slightly offshore. There's some rhythmic features. So we can just click on the threshold here and push it a bit more towards the sand pixels, for example. So then we can go through a few images so we can get some time series. So sometimes you may have some clouds, but if it's not affecting the shoreline detection, then to maximize temporal resolution, you may want to keep a low percentage of cloud cover. So like this one I would keep, for example. And then I think there's a couple more. So I think it would take 1 hour to go through the 500 images at a given site. And then so then you can either take the 2D shorelines that were mapped and put them into a GIS workflow, or there are also some functions in COSAT to actually do the shoreline analysis. So there's the option to load some transects. So I've put some cross-shore transects here, so 5 different transects along the embayment. And then we can compute the intersection along those transects. And there's a parameter to do some alongshore averaging, because sometimes there's instantaneous and localized water levels that may affect the shoreline position. And then once the intersection have been computed, we can look at the time series. And these time series are not tidally corrected, so each image was taken at a different stage of the tide. So it's really important to apply tidal correction afterwards along each transect. So here I've got some tides from a global tide model at Slapton Sands. And then you can find the time of acquisition of each image along the tide time series. And with an estimate of the beach slope, we can apply tidal correction along each transect. So you can see some similarities between the time series and the tides, because we haven't done a tidal correction, but then when we apply the tidal correction, it should adjust. So here I'm using a beach slope of 0.13, but if you have some surveyed beach slopes, it's better. So yeah, that's it for the demonstration. I'm happy to take any questions on the toolbox. So
thank you, Cillian. It's really, really interesting, and we've had quite a few questions in for you. I'm going to start with a question from Andy Pierce, and he says, our monitoring program have a rich data set of beach and cliff profiles, and in some cases 3D beach levels. Is this sufficient, or are there other field data sets that we should start collecting now to enable remote sensing techniques like this to be applied in, say, 5 or 10 years' time?
So to perform an assessment of the accuracy of the remote sensing products. Yeah, so we've done some evaluation of the accuracy at different sites where we had long-term in situ monitoring. And so at microtidal wave-dominated Australian beaches, we're pretty confident around 10 to 15 meters horizontal accuracy after tidal correction. Then for macrotidal and meso to macrotidal beaches, it becomes more complex. So yeah, I think in situ surveys are the best ground truth. So 3D topographic surveys. Yeah.
Is there? I think what Andy would like to know is there anything else we could be doing on the ground to help sort of aid the remote sensing, or is the data that we already collect sufficient to check that it's working right?
I think it's the data that you collect is sufficient to validate the satellite derived shorelines.
Ah, that's good. It's good to know. I've also had a question in from Will, who is from the Welsh monitoring programme. And he says, great talk and fantastic freeware tool. Have you tasked any private higher resolution satellites to perform shoreline capture? And if so, how does the performance of the outputs compare?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So we haven't done any tasking, but we've got a research license with Planet Labs, which is one of the higher resolution CubeSats. And I haven't. It's not my project. It's a student that's working with Mitchell Harley that did the validation, and we actually found that the accuracy will improve with better resolution up to a certain point, and I think it's we got to about 5 meter root mean squared error with 3 meter per pixel resolution. But after a while, like even using 30 centimeter per pixel resolution will not help anymore because we're mapping an instantaneous shoreline. So there's those errors due to run up. So we're not doing any time averaging. So I think the accuracy will improve up to a certain point where higher resolution is not needed anymore.
I've got a question on the
thank
chat,
you.
Jay.
And yeah, go for it, Joe.
Sure. Cillian, so Ruth has asked, is there a minimum beach width that this works with for COSAT? So as Sentinel is 10 meter res, does it need a beach over 10 meters in width?
Yeah, I think it needs at least 1 to 2 sand pixels to at least be able to get that spectral signature of the sand and find the boundary between sand and water. So if it cannot get at least a full sand pixel, I think it won't work.
Brilliant. Okay, and then I've got one final question for you, Cillian, and that is it possible that with increased satellite imagery, we could use historic data, including weather records, to be able to visualize the evolution of an entire coastline and automatically keep that model updated in near real time?
I don't see why this wouldn't be possible. So the temporal resolution is improving greatly. So since 2016, we have Sentinel-2, which is 2 satellites, 5 days revisit period at the equator. So so calibrating models, we haven't worked on modeling at all, but I can imagine that some shoreline models could be calibrated in the future using satellite data.
One last question on the, chat, Jace.
Oh, yeah, go for it, Joe.
So Kit Stokes is asking, what do you see as the next step in satellite coastal detection?
So shoreline mapping, not bathymetry or. So
it's either what's the next step in shoreline mapping, or if you see a kind of a bigger picture next step in satellite detection in general for the coast, what might that be, do you think?
So in shoreline mapping, I've seen some really interesting technological advance from SkySat, where they actually rotate the satellite while it's in orbit, so they can take 90-second clips of the same point on the Earth at like sub-meter resolution. And then this will allow to do a time averaging, so 90 seconds time averaging, and remove those fluctuations of the shoreline in the short term. So that's a really nice technological advancement that's becoming available commercially.
Thanks, Cillian.
Thanks, Cillian. Thank you very much for answering all of those questions and for your presentation. I'm going to move on now to our next speaker, who is Erin. If you can see her slide. So Erin's talk looked at headland sand bypassing, focusing on the north coast of Cornwall. And if Erin's there, I hope she hasn't dropped out.
Hi, I'm here. Yeah.
There we go. Erin, we had some questions in for you from people who've watched the presentation, and I'll start with this one. In the area of interest, North Cornwall, did you look at the number of headlands which had sediment at the headland toe in compared to those that did not? And was there a correlation between that and the headland length?
Yeah, so we, if we go to, do you have the next slide?
Oh, yes, I do. Sorry.
Give you my slide?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me move that
if
one.
we can get that up, then I can give you a quick visual
There you go.
image of that. Yeah, so there are a few things that we investigated for how they affect headland bypassing, and the third one along is the sand coverage. So that's the spatial extent of the sand, including the sediment at the headland toe. We do have data on how many headlands have sediment at the headland toe. I didn't correlate it with the headland cross-shore extent, but as you get headlands with a greater cross-shore extent, you would expect a stronger tidal velocity off the headland toe, so that might indicate more scour, so probably more likely to have less sediment there. But that'd be interesting to have a quick look at. Thank you.
Something else for you to think about. We've also had one in that says, what data inputs do you need to be able to apply this method to different sections of the coastline?
So sorry, what data would I need to apply it to different parts of the coast? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the data required for this, you can get, well, essentially what you need is to be able to estimate the parameters here. So if you can get the headland cross shore length, now that's defined, if you see the sort of red polygon on the left, that's defined by the water line at the particular water elevation. So in this case, it's spring high water, and you so you define your headland there. You take a line parallel to the back beach and then perpendicular to the apex, and that defines your sort of half headland polygon. So you would need to be able to get your water line. You would also want your wave conditions, your instant wave conditions, transformed to the breaking point, so you know sort of what depth they're breaking at and the breaking wave height. So that way you can then draw a line perpendicular from the beach and get the surf zone width as well. So when you have the wave conditions and the headland morphological parameters and some bathymetry to say the depth of the headland toe, and if you can get sand coverage data, then that's ideal as well, which I was able to derive the sand coverage data from the UKHO 2-meter bathymetry, which if you're interested in how that was done, that's in the presentation as well. So that's the data that's required really to apply it. So it's, you want the headland morphology, you want the wave conditions, and an indication of the depth of the headland toe and the coverage of sand.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I've got one question in the chat from Jolyon. Erin, has the impact of river flow onto beaches been considered in relation to headland bypassing?
I think it has been considered by others. It's not considered in this study, but I think there's definitely literature that looks at well, there's literature that looks at inlet bypassing, and I think I recall a paper, but I couldn't tell you the name of it, which did include the impact of a river. So yeah, I think it has been looked at, but not in this sort of parametric sense. But I may be wrong.
Thanks, Erin. Thank you. Joe, have you got any more questions from the chat?
No, that's it for Erin.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation. And if anyone
worries.
hasn't watched it, please do go onto our website and have a look. It's very interesting. Thanks, Erin. So next we're going to move on to Jak. Hopefully Jak's still there, phoning all the way in from Australia. And Jak's presentation is on ShoreTrans, which is his model, which is a rule-based shore-face translation tool for estimating coastal change. And Jak, we've had a couple of questions in for you. Are there plans to develop ShoreTrans model into a 3D model?
Yeah, it's something I was thinking about. It's something you could do just by having multiple profiles along shore, say in an embayment, and then it's a matter of balancing volume between adjacent profiles. And there is already sort of a half attempt to do something like that when this was applied to Perranporth. So for example, what I was interested in there is if the dune is eroding along one part of the beach and another part of the beach has cliffs, then the assumption is that where the dunes erode, it's then redistributed along shore. So some of it goes to the area that's backed by cliffs, offsetting some of the erosion that occurs there. But it's not fully implemented in that it doesn't account for, say, different onshore transport rates of sand bodies from offshore, for example. But using those same principles, it could be implemented to work along an embayment, for example. There's some complications there in terms of balancing volume, but yeah, it's something that could be done.
Thanks. And also we've been asked, or rather you've been asked, can this model be applied worldwide? So you gave some examples in your talk, but could it be used everywhere?
Yeah, it's not universal at the moment in that it doesn't, you know, it's not a matter of being a particular place in the world. It's a matter of what comprises the geomorphology of the coastline that you're looking at. But it can be, it will apply to more types of coastlines with the addition of extra rules. So for example, at the moment, it doesn't handle soft cliff erosion, but that's something that there are rules out there, the existing rules for how to handle that, and that's something that could be incorporated. And also it doesn't deal with, say, fine sediment. So if you have soft cliff erosion, that material, a lot of it will be transported away from the local area. But again, there's rules that could be introduced to account for that. And then as more and more rules are introduced, it becomes more universally applicable. But at the moment it isn't, but it's something that can be done in future.
Oh, excellent. Well, you just answered another question, which is nice. But Joe, have you got any on the chat?
Yeah, just one for you, Jak, from Marianne. Do we have permission to use images from the presentation? Marianne works for the FSC at Slapton, so it would find it useful. Yeah. The only thing I'd say is, I mean, it's still, the publication hasn't been published yet. It's still under review. But if you put in some sort of note that it's just from a presentation, that it could change, that's fine. There's no problem with that.
We can always put Marianne in contact with you, Jak, so she can get.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The right.
I saw from, is that Will?
Yeah,
another question there.
Will.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, nice one. I'll just read it. It says, do you anticipate that coastal practitioners, like people in local councils, will be able to use it, and what is the most appropriate data they should be collecting? That was kind of the idea with this. It's got a few different aims, but it's meant to be really simple and easy to apply. So if you looked at that at the presentation, right at the end of the presentation, I stuck a screenshot of a GUI. And I just threw some data in there from Bondi that I'd collected a few years ago. Now I'm reading Hert's question. And so you should be able to do that from any coastline that you've got a profile for. And the idea is, it's not, you know, it's just applying these rules of translation of the profile. It's not physics based, and it's not moving sediment around. But what it gives is some sort of idea in 2 dimensions of how a complex profile, say with a wall or a cliff, might change, or a barrier or a dune, how it might change. And the idea is precisely for people like, say, Will was asking about people in councils, that once there is a GUI out there, all you need is a profile that is topo bathymetry. It does need to go offshore.
Jak, we're gonna have to move on. Can you answer Hert's question? Can you type it to him, and then everyone can see it? If I move on to the next speaker.
Yeah, sure.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Feel free to keep asking questions to the speakers in the chat as we go on. Cheers, Jak. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
Okay, we're going to move on to Harshinie and William, and they are from Swansea University, and their talk is on computational modelling of the impact of salt marsh management interventions on coastal flooding. And hello, Harshinie and William. We've had some questions in for you from the website. I'll start with them. Did you consider fluvial flooding in your modelling?
Yeah, so the Tav is the main river into the estuary, and even under extreme flow conditions, it has a very low flow. So that's included, the worst case is included alongside the tidal flooding, but because it's so much lower than the tidal prism, it's not really a big impact in that estuary.
Okay, thank you. And which other sites have you or are you going to model? Perhaps the results would be more significant if it was a less sheltered site.
So we've gone on to look at other estuaries around Wales, because the Tav is very sheltered and has its own context, specificity. I can't say the word specifics, but we've gone on to model 6 estuaries around Wales. So we've got some around South Wales, but more around the west coast and the north coast, then looking at other contexts. So haven't shown that work here, and that's being kind of analysed in a route to publish at the moment. But yeah, we've seen lots of different results at those estuaries, and very heavily context specific.
Okay.
But yeah, all Welsh estuaries is what we've modelled so far.
Yeah, amazing. Joe, have you got any on the chat?
Nothing on the chat as of yet. Jace?
Oh, okay. Oh, well, thank you, William, and thank you, Harshinie, for being here and for your presentations. Please go and watch the presentations on the website if you haven't already. It is a very interesting thing, and especially with sea level rise and kind of the managed retreat strategies that are coming into plan, then salt marshes are going to be a very important asset, I think. Thank you very much. We will move on.
Just had one in.
Oh, you just had one in. There you go. This morning.
So, well, this is from Kit. Were you surprised that the salt marshes had little impact on coastal flooding?
For the Tav estuary, personally, I wasn't too surprised because it's very sheltered. I could see the predominant storms were coming from the southwest, and the salt marshes aren't oriented to attenuate those waves effectively. So under those conditions, I wasn't too surprised. We did see more attenuation when we put in more easterly storms. So those were attenuating, salt marshes in the Tav were attenuating those waves, but under those conditions, the water level would be much lower because the surge wouldn't propagate from that direction. So not too surprised for the Tav, but in other estuaries we've modelled, we have seen a larger role of the salt marshes. So we have seen a significant contribution to coastal flooding in other estuaries.
Thank you. Thanks, William. Right. We'll move on to Tom Powell, who I hope is here.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, Tom. Hi, Tom. So Tom is here, and the presentation that he's going to be answering questions about was actually done by Anne-Marie Callan. They're both from the Tidelines project, which is a project aiming to develop research and action with communities in response to changing marine and estuary environments, specifically Exmouth and the Estuary. And Tom, we've had a couple of questions in from the website. Are there plans to perhaps extend this project to other areas of the southwest?
Really good question. I think, Tidelines is I guess in some ways a really place-specific project in that it's driven by people who live within the estuary. But we obviously see the really kind of strong parallels with other estuary systems. And I actually work at the Global Systems Institute at the University of Exeter. So we're really interested in, I suppose, making links with other estuary communities and trying to sort of transfer the learning from the Tidelines project rather than expanding Tidelines itself, because the way the project works is very much around sort of participation with local people and local relationships. So I think Tidelines itself probably not transferable, but a lot of learning there and a lot of connections to be made with other estuary systems. We'd really like to explore that.
That'd be good. Have you found the communications between academics and the public to be useful. So,
Yeah,
or,
extremely so.
yeah.
I think there's a real hunger for that in both directions. What we've found most useful, and something that I'm coming to this from the academic side, but I've worked with Anne-Marie on various projects over the last 5 or 6 years, and what she and people like her are incredibly good at doing are creating very informal spaces for communication between academics and members of public interest groups and other publics. And when you have that sort of equal footing and informal environment, you can have really productive discussions for both sides. People coming from outside academia get a much more kind of nuanced view of the uncertainty and the complexity of working in the academic world and the frustration of it and all of those sort of things that we don't talk about very much in formal presentations. And for people like me on the academic side, actually having an opportunity to air some of those kind of frustrations and the things we're not sure about, and the emotional context of our work, working in global change and environmental change, is also a really incredible opportunity. Actually, it's something I really value.
Brilliant. And finally, has the project expanded over the year quickly, and how many members have you now got?
Oh, that's something that Anne-Marie would be able to ask better than I can. We've had really good engagement. This sort of initial pilot year was always about kind of trying to reach as many people as possible, and then kind of try to, I suppose, develop a kind of really active core group of people that would keep things moving forward and keep reaching out to new groups. So a lot of people have engaged with the online activities, and I think people actually being stuck in Exmouth during lockdown, rather, because Exmouth has quite a large commuter community, actually really helped with that. And people with kids looking for a way to engage them in their local environment and all that sort of thing has been great. So I really, really hope that once we are allowed to have big real life meetings, that energy will be maintained and we'll move forward.
Joe, have you got any on the chat?
None on the chat, Jace.
None on the chat. Okay, well, thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you. It was a really interesting project, and I know that PCO are hoping to get a bit more involved in it.
Yeah, really looking forward to speaking about that further. Cheers.
Brilliant, thank you.
Bye.
I'm just aware that we are on 11 o'clock, so if people do need to leave, then I'm sorry we've run over, but we've still got some really interesting speakers to answer questions. So I'll quickly move on to Emily. She's from Coastal Partners, and her talk was on the South Hayling Island storms and bimodal seas. Absolutely fascinating talk. And I know, Joe, you've had some questions in, haven't you, for Emily? Yep. On the chat. So if you want to take those away.
Sure. Emily, this is from Tim Pope. Says, you say the existing beach profile is based on a significant wave height and water level. What approach are you taking to predict the run-up under these conditions? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, what was that? What approach are we taking for predicting the run-up?
Yep.
Yeah, well, the existing design profile was actually put in place quite a long time ago, in the early 2000s, and there were some calculations done on wave overtopping at that point. But going forwards, we'll hope to use kind of shingle B to look at the run up and see if and how we might need to change that going forwards.
Okay. And another one. So. The model result you present at the end indicates significant buildup of material behind the initial crest. However, the examples you showed earlier would suggest erosion of the crest or crest lowering was observed. How confident are you in the model?
Yeah, quite confident, I think. So that big spike, we kind of make the assumption that rather than the build up, that actually kind of gets pushed back and fills up the prom and the gardens that are in that first line of properties. So yeah, I think we feel quite confident. We do see a lot of crest retreat, and that big spike sort of is a bit false, but that material does get pushed back and over. And linked back to your previous question, that kind of increases the run up as well. So I think we feel quite confident.
Emily, I've got another one which came in on the chat as well. And that says, the figure showing the shingle bee profile result, figure 4.1, very specific, does not seem to demonstrate conservation of mass. So how reliable can this model result be?
I think I need a bit more clarity. I know in the model you can sort of choose to conserve choose that as an option to conserve mass or not. We obviously didn't do that.
Okay.
We didn't do the modelling bit.
Don't worry, that's fine. I've got another question as well, and that is, are you hoping that these results, which state the return period of extreme events are reduced as a result of bimodal wave climates, will help inform the BMP, especially if it is attempting to design a 1 in 200 year defence?
Yeah, that was sort of what we were looking at, just to see actually how, what is kind of the difference between the bimodal waves and the unimodal waves, and what effect that has on the return period of the beach. And yeah, it was directly done to form the self-hailing BMP, and we're hoping that we'll be able to take the results of this into the next BMP. There's also some strategic decisions to be made on that as well.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you. Joe, have you got any more questions come in?
No, that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Emily. It was a really interesting talk. And once again, if you haven't watched Emily's talk already, it is absolutely fascinating. We're going to move on to now Appin, who I hope is still with us.
Hi, yes, I'm
Hi,
still
Appin.
here.
I was worried you were going to be called out on some flooding stuff around today. So glad you could join us. So Appin and her team from the Environment Agency have been looking at the coastal nature-based solutions down in Newlyn and looking at the Eco Reef pilot down there. Appin, we've had, Joe, have you had any questions in on the chat yet for Appin?
Yeah, I've had one already come in.
Would like to fire away?
Yeah, so this is from Marianne. She's just wondering what biomimicry inspired the textures tried on the blocks, if any.
So yeah, that's quite an interesting question. At the moment, the trial blocks have actually been done up by one of the partners on the Interreg pilot. So they have kind of been in charge of the textures that were used for those trial blocks. But what we're actually hoping to do kind of over the coming winter is just find out a little bit more about best surface textures, and potentially even deploy some more blocks next summer, because there's been a few kind of project delays associated with COVID. So I'm not entirely 100% sure on what their kind of logic was behind the texturing, but I'm kind of hoping that also, because they were basically given a big kind of pile of material from the quarry next to the breakwater, so there's leftover material that we can experiment with a few more textures next year, hopefully.
Ah, excellent. Joe, have you got any more?
That was it for now, Jace.
Okay, I've got some that came in from the website, and this one is especially apt for Newlyn, I guess, there's a big fishing fleet there. Regarding the artificial reefs, do you see any potential implications of such interventions on stakeholders such as the fishing industry? Could they also serve a potential mini marine reserves, helping to support local fish and shellfish stock?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the hope is definitely that the reefs would kind of improve local biodiversity, which, yeah, ideally it would have a positive impact on fish stocks. We're kind of planning on looking into the types of species that we might expect to see in the locations. So we've got a good idea of kind of how best to cater for local populations and kind of which species we might expect to see a boost in. So I guess that's also kind of slightly linked to the previous question as well. I guess in my presentation, I talked a little bit about the fact that the SMP does highlight that there's potentially going to be a need for offshore structures elsewhere in Mounts Bay, and kind of building on the marine conservation zone that's already there. So yeah, I mean, that would be really great if that happened, definitely.
That takes us nicely on to the next question actually that we have, which is, other than the eco reefs, are there other examples of sustainable techniques or technologies that are being considered or researched under the START project? Yeah, so the Newland pilot is actually the only pilot that's looking at kind of an eco reef style project. The other European pilots, there's a bit of a kind of group of different types. So there's dune rehabilitation. There's one that's looking at kind of facilitating inland dune migration. They're actually taking out infrastructure behind the dunes there to let it, migrate inland. And the pilot in Vlissingen is looking at kind of a series of inshore water storage channels that will be designed to take water in and guide flows during storms. So they're looking at kind of populating these channels with plant species that can tolerate saltwater intrusions. So yeah, I mean, that's just a really high level look, but if anyone's interested in looking at the pilots in more detail, the website is sarcc.eu. And yeah, we're always keen for people to check out our website. So there'll be more information kind of uploaded onto that as the pilots progress. Brilliant, thanks, Appin. I think Joe's got one more question for you.
This is from Tim Appin. So trials with bioblocks or reef blocks appear to have been going on for a while. Do you see it becoming part of all future coastal defence works, or compulsory even?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think definitely, I mean, EA projects are required to result in biodiversity net gains. So there's lots of different ways that can kind of be achieved, but it's really nice to think of, and it's kind of quite, it provides quite a complete picture if you can provide that biodiversity net gain on site and kind of do that through eco-engineering of your coastal structures. So I think it would be great if it was kind of compulsory, but that's more of a personal opinion, I guess. But yeah, I do think it's good, and it's something that we definitely need to consider with coastal squeeze and sea level rise. So yeah.
Brilliant, thanks, Appin.
Thank you.
Well, that's everyone, I think. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of the speakers who have done presentations for us, and please do go and watch the presentations if you haven't already. They're going to be on our website for the foreseeable future, and we'll leave the question form up there, so if you do have any more questions, then we can try and connect you with the speakers. Obviously, if we were in person today, you'd be able to go off and speak to everyone, but we're not able to do that. So I'd just like to say a big thank you again. And Joe, I don't know if you want to say anything before everyone goes off.
No, just again, thank you very much for supporting us and turning up today, and hopefully next year we'll be able to offer you a bigger event for our 15th anniversary. So I hope to see you all there next year.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, see you definitely, well, it won't be definite, but hopefully see you next year. And if you do have any other questions, please do send them into the Coastal Observatory email or submit them on the website, and we'll get you connected with the speakers. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Kim.
Thank you, everybody.
Well done. Extremely good.
Thanks, John.
That was like action-packed hour and a quarter. That's really good.
Yeah, whizzed through.
Yeah, it is important that that you see the appreciation and the use of the data that you guys are producing. I continue to be surprised and pleased with the different ways that your data is used by people in ways that we never envisaged when we started. So well done.
It's nice also to see that you know, people on the other side of the planet are using data sets that we've put together at Torcross and stuff to validate their models and things. So it's good to know that that's being done.
Yeah. Didn't get the opportunity really to say thank you to Izzy and the rest of your colleagues. And obviously Emerald. I didn't see Emerald's name today. I assume she's breathing easy at the moment. But can you pass on my thanks to everyone in the team? I'm tremendously impressed.
Thanks, John.
Will do.
I can see you there, Izzy. Well done.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks,
Yeah,
John.
thanks, guys.
Right.
Coffee time, I think.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
See you later, guys.